Oh, we are live. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's session. I'm Vani Kola from Kalaari Capital. I'm excited to kick off today's segment of SaaS From Scratch. This is an effort to make sure that we can bring insights from founders who have built their companies from zero to the great companies they are today, and to capture their insights in that specific 0 to 1 startup journey, which is the most difficult time for most founders to find their product market fit and scale the business. I'm really excited that we have Baskar with us today. He's co founder and CEO of Amagi Labs. For those of you who may not have heard of Amagi before, they are not only a SaaS unicorn from India and a global leader in cloud technology for broadcast and connected TV, but I think their story is really an exciting story on what it takes to take a technology platform and build it into a globally respected product, and how to do that with patience and perseverance. Because though this has taken 15 years, I think really what matters is how you work through the resilience of being an entrepreneur, and how that's really important. And in today's climate of where we have funding scarcity and questions around scalability of companies, Baskar's journey, I think, has many, many great lessons for founders. So, Baskar, welcome, and really appreciate you taking the time to talk to our audience today.
Absolutely, Vani. Pleasure for being in this, and thank you for kind of calling me for this. It's really, really a pleasure.
So, I think there are many first, how do I do this first kind of questions, among which is how to crack your first customers, and you did that well, and you're an India-based company, yet you have large customers in US. What are the insights on learning on getting your early adopter customers?
Again, I'll just
And
take a
maybe
step
before that also, because just a little about Amagi and the journey,
back.
right? So
That'll be useful for people to kind of understand the journey, because there are
yeah,
two sets of the companies actually had two lifetimes. Maybe one lifetime we killed, and the other lifetime which actually we are living today to some
yeah,
extent, right? So the company, again, Vani, going back, like what you were talking about, was registered in 2008, but the first product that we launched was in 2010. So we were building a geo-targeted advertising business on television. So we were in the
yeah,
media business largely. So in Indian TV channels, we wanted to split the advertising slots so that in every city you'll have different advertising, geo-targeted. So if you're watching an IPL match in Mumbai, you would see a different advertising than Bangalore at the same time. What happens in a targeted environment of the internet? We were trying to do it in 2010 on the television sets itself, the regular cable and satellite platforms. That's where we started the company. So again, 3-4 years, we almost 2010 to 2015, we actually expanded that business and started to really build it out. Obviously, the challenge in that business was we were actually limited by the market size, and we were limited by the number of TV channels in India which can support that sort of capability. So we actually pivoted in 2016 as a company. So pretty much we brought that business to zero, literally, and started an entirely new venture of creating a SaaS offering for media companies worldwide, where they can run all their operations. So if you're a TV channel today, for example, people run their TV channels on big data centers, have their own studio setups, run everything in a big office environment, or what we call the on-prem environment. Amagi's fundamental vision was, can we just remove all of the hardware, all of the real estate, and can we build it as a virtualized software infrastructure, which can completely be managed through a browser interface, and nothing is needed. Fundamentally, this is pre-COVID. I'm talking about 2015, 16 timeframe when it made sense. So we started that whole vision of building it out. Is where we started. And just cut we had about 2 TV channels worldwide which actually believed in us, and I'll come to that story because that's super important from the 0 to 1 standpoint of what happened. But if you look at it today, we run about 2,500 channels, one of the largest in the world in terms of number of channels running on a cloud infrastructure today, for example. So the last 5-6 years has been a fantastic journey of that whole transformation from a product market fit that we could see in 2015-16 timeframe. It took us time to kind of get it to 2,500 plus channels today, and that is running. Going back to your question, Vani, fundamentally in terms of what happened in the initial days was, so when we conceptualized this whole idea that can we not run a complete channel on the cloud, it looked esoteric. Most of our TV channels worldwide thought that this is a crazy idea because they said, my latencies are very high, reliability, cloud security for my content. How do I build large video files to be pushed to the cloud? Everything looked like a pretty bad problem to solve, right? But directionally, we were clear that cloud is evolving, internet is evolving, and this is the future of what it happens, for example. So what we found is a first customer that we found, in fact, is a company called Horse and Country. This is run by a lady out of the UK. She was our first customer. So her name is Heather. Even today, she's our customer, and I'm kind of a very visionary customer, right? So she was having a small channel, TV channel. It just focused on equestrian content. That's all that she had. And she wanted to take it to all of the audience in the UK and in Europe and other places. And she was finding it very cost constraining, prohibitive to go over satellite and be able to do the whole thing. So she was having a real hard problem. And we had a solution, which was not the most sophisticated solution at that point in time, but she had no choices other than really trying us out because she felt, okay, I don't have a solution. These people are claiming something can be done. Why don't I do a fit there and then figure it out? So that's where we started the journey, Vani. It was not I remember talking to her and saying, she was asking me, hey, what do you think? I said, try for 8 weeks. If it doesn't work, you always have a choice. We'll return the money back. So we said, okay, that's the bet you have to make for us. And it's been 8 years that she's kind of expanded her business on top of our infrastructure today. But that was a moment of choice that she made. We went to a customer who was the most hungriest for the use case because they didn't have many good choices. Either a choice was 10 times more expensive or she was not able to get what she wanted. Then that's where I think the value was much more extremely easy to kind of convince. We didn't go to the largest channel. Today, for example, just to give you, we run NBC channels worldwide. In the US, all the cable channels run on an Amagi infrastructure today. That's what we're moving towards. And that's like NBC Comcast is the largest media company in the world, which is adopting today. It's taken them 8 years to come to that sort of stage. Initially, we had to start with the smallest of the channel, who was the hungriest to do things, not the largest, because largest comes later in some sense. So that's been a fantastic journey, but that's where we started, Vani. Really with one customer, really working with them in detail, getting them only the first 2 channels, focused very, very extremely saying, let's get the 2 channels being successful. Leave the thousands later, but let's get those things successful. That's been the biggest learning for us.
So go for the hungriest versus the largest in terms of your first customers. That's, I think, really good insight and applies to any business. But you also talked about, where you started and what you do today. So this journey of pivot, right? Who helped you to do that? How did you really arrive at being okay to do a pivot? That's a very uncertain period, lots of doubts, I assume. And what would you derive from that to advise how to think about pivoting business and still being energized and motivated,
Absolutely, Vani. Again, so going back, Vani, again, we are 3 co-founders. So Srini, Vidya, and myself. So we go a long way back. We know each other for 30 plus years now as a company. So we were classmates in college. This is Amagi was our second venture. So the first thing, Vani, when we started this venture was we said, hey, we're going to run this for the next 25, 30 years. Not for 5 years, not for 10 years, 30 years. So we put a big constraint for ourselves saying, we like to build a disruptive, large business. It will take 30 years. We'll live for 30 years and do that as a company. And we've built an institution of sorts, a legacy which will be beyond all of us. So the thought process initially when we get in was very clear. It's a long haul journey. It was never a short haul. We were very conscious about that particular segment of what we wanted to do. So that is the first step. which is obviously give us a guiding light that at any point in time when we look at a pivot, we were looking at it in a, see, when we pivoted in less 5 years, 2010 we started the service, 2015 16 we pivoted. 5 6 years looked too short for us in the journey that we were trying to do any which way. So to that extent, the perspectives were different. What I'm saying is, although there were real business choices to make, but for us in
Yeah.
a 30-year journey, lose the 5 years is okay. Let's go back to the drawing board and let's kickstart with the same
Yeah.
energy, the effort. Right? That's important for us as a very important aspect when we looked at it. Now, coming to the point of pivot, Vani, again, what is odd for us is actually the business in India was growing. We were we started building about, I think, 150 or 160 crores of business that was actually growing. The only problem in that business model was we felt that the business infrastructure that we had, which is a two-sided market where we were working with TV channels and with advertisers, will not scale to become $1 billion business. So we said, hey, this business will not take us to $1 billion and is very, very India specific. Henceforth, we should not do it. So it was not a decision of we were not profitable, but we were successful as a business. Large advertisers were working to us, but there were business structure limitations existed. So that was a very odd decision to take a pivot, because it's not like business is not growing, nothing is happening. It's an easy decision to make. This is our board was like, what are you guys saying? It's growing. It's been doubling. Why would you not build that completely in some sense? So the decision was for us in a 30-year journey. It looked like we cannot build $1 billion plus sort of an enterprise revenue. So I don't worry about valuation. So revenue, we wanted to build $1 billion plus revenue enterprises that we want to build. It looked like this models will not scale to that, and we will never be able to be profitable in that sort of model. So we went back to the board, told them, hey, looks like this is not going to work, but we have a SaaS model which we had started trialing with few customers. We believe this is the future of things. We were at $500,000 revenue on that. So at that point in time, we went to our board and said, okay, we're convinced that we can take this $500,000 and build $1 billion business, but we cannot take the current 150 crore business and build $1 billion business. So that was a decision we had to make. We were fairly clear on the decision, and then I think the board thought we were crazy, but I think they bet on us and said, okay, if you folks believe that's what the right thing to do, let's go. And this is after we had raised about $35 million. $30 million already spent, $5 million in the bank. So we had to pretty much become a new startup with the $5 million money in 2016 to rebuild the whole enterprise to some extent. So that was the point of pivot that happened.
I think it's better that the board thinks that you are crazy and ambitious than that you are lazy and not aspiring, I guess. So today, though, majority of your revenue comes from global sales or global customers rather.
Correct.
So, and yet you are a India domiciled company.
Right.
What are some of the do's and don'ts? And you didn't have tons of capital, right? So what are the do's and don'ts in going global? Because many founders aspire to create global companies today.
Right.
From your own lessons and experience. And also, likewise, do you see, if you had to do this again, would you still be an India domiciled company? Because, today, especially in the funding environment and going public or acquisition, M&A environment, and you can't switch domicile, right? You can't be US company, flip into India. You could be India company, flip into US, but it'll become harder after you raise some capital. And founders are not quite clear, and they automatically gravitate towards being a Delaware company. So thoughts on both, domicile and global sales.
Vani, let me talk about the domicile, right? Again, we had started as an India company because that was the only choice we had, because we were trying to build an Indian market company. So I don't think we thought so much to really start off with, right? Having said that, if we looked at it today, and again, this is a conversation we're having with our investors, Vani, right now, is looks like in hindsight, given the last 2 years, India domicile helps because Indian public markets seem to be delivering better than the US markets to some extent. At least the last 2 years has been kind of interesting sort of a journey. So I wouldn't go back, change a lot of things, Vani, to some extent. Again, domicile is either it's a decision you need to make very early, like what you pointed out. Either you should register yourself as a Delaware company, start off with it, or you don't. But at least what I'm hearing from the community of investors that I'm talking to, a lot of their companies are again actually recommending back, saying, hey, maybe India domicile is not a bad idea to do that. So is there a pros and cons of it? Absolutely yes. Because if you're in Delaware and you're going to a Nasdaq listed company tomorrow, obviously the feel of the company, the reliability of what your customers will feel about it, and is extremely high. So clearly there's value in doing that. But if you're going to be a sub $10 billion company in terms of market cap and others, analysts don't cover you as much there. Again, this is a very public market problem that as you grow, that you'll feel. So to that extent, I think being large and then being global and then you're there, it makes a lot of sense. But if you're in the mid-tier, then it might not make a lot of sense in terms of the commercial valuation and the market and how it actually responds to you. Because it looks like global investors are in India right now. We're seeing a lot more excitement in the Indian stock market, for example. That's one aspect. Acquisition-wise, today it's become almost a level playing field where you're able to, I think if you want to get acquired, I think India companies are getting acquired. There are obviously regulatory issues to cross and others. There are some bureaucracies to address. But having said it, it's not a big issue. It makes a lot of, obviously it's very, very friendly if you're doing it to the US. But the tides have turned to an extent where I don't think it's not really one or the other is so distinctly different today, Vani, the way I'm seeing it, at least from a company standpoint. Coming back to the global sales aspect, Vani, going back to our problem spaces, 80% of our revenues comes from the US today. Almost 17% of our revenues comes from EMEA, which is the European market that we get. Only less than 3% comes from Asia, and India will be maybe less than 0.5%, right? So just the way it's today, for example, right? Now, if the market is there, we have to be there. Again, we tried all of this, Vani, fundamentally where we had actually built first we built our own go-to-market sales teams there, actually. Separately, we built a sales team ourselves. But what we found is unless there is one of the founders or somebody senior sitting there, understanding the market, evangelizing the company and the customers, you cannot do it sitting here, for example. So the first thing we realized after a year's time of effort, because we had hired the best of sales teams and go-to-market teams there, but nothing worked because they don't have the heart of the business. They don't understand the cultural nuances of a country sitting in India, 8,000 miles away. Just the time zone matters, and it killed the whole thing. So initial set of people we actually shipped from India. So one of my co-founders, Srini, moved his family, everything, to the US, set shop in LA, and we started really engaging with customers on day one from there on. So for us, the learning was unless there is a very, very high, either a founder team or a very senior person who's already kind of in the company, kind of feels the company is their own, and be part of that equation in the market of your choice, that's super important. I think that made a big difference for us, Vani, as a company.
So, what were the one or two things that today's SaaS founders, and I come back to this question because is there enough depth of market in India today versus when you were, obviously doing revenue expansion? Is it possible to build India for India companies, or should all companies in SaaS especially have an ambition of global sales? If so, how early should they think about other markets besides India?
Again, I think, India is obviously becoming attractive, Vani. The only problem is in a B2B SaaS environment, yes, the market's starting to happen. I think there's enough, both the startup community and the corporate starting to really adopt. And I've met a lot of founders who are starting to really start from an India-first approach of go-to-market, which I think is interesting and good as well. But having said that, at least the learnings that I'm seeing from other companies as you start growing to a $10 million and above, you want to be able to expand it more globally, because see, SaaS as a model lends itself very nicely to a globalization option strategy. So it's no point in trying to build it specifically for a country unless it's really about regulations, it's about really specific policies that you're trying to codify in the systems. You might want to look at it as start with a global play in mind, but take specific local market approaches so that you're not kind of distracting yourself trying to do many things, but focus on specific markets to start with. India could be a great market to start off with, because if you're in a 0 to 1 journey, I don't think you need to be in the US to start that whole journey to start with. And given the horizontal SaaS environments, if your ARRs are anywhere from less than $10,000 ARR, for example, you could technically build everything through a simple selling models, through calls, through mechanisms, completely remote demos today. All of that inside sales models are really working today very well, Vani. That's what I'm learning, right? So clearly there's opportunities to do that. Unless you're going to really sell to a large enterprise, where you need to obviously build the relationships and do it. So build for global, plan for global, but you can start local and actually build a 0 to 1 journey, even to 1 to 10 journey. Absolutely possible, is my feeling, Vani. And again, there are companies which have done extremely well only in Asia, for example. So that's the next step. You don't need to go only. It's not like everybody needs to go to the US. Asia, clearly, we've seen lots of, right? I was talking to Anish in Capillary, or they kind of build a decent business where now they're going US, for example, are clear mechanisms where those strategies are starting to work as well.
Yeah, so, and going back to something you said earlier, Baskar, you talked about the three co-founders and how you knew each other. And so, in terms of, so obviously having that strong founding group is important, and sometimes co-founders find it difficult to stay together for a long time. So, what do you think you did as co-founders, ground rules you established for each other that allowed you to work together as an effective team for so long? Although I can tell you from my just statistical data, although of course, like every marriage, you never think this may someday not work, and you shouldn't think that way when you start down on a journey. But most founders, when they come for early stage funding, cannot contemplate that maybe someday they will have such different opinions and they will have to part ways. But it happens far more, and it destroys value in the company, of course, when it happens.
Correct.
But it's a very high number of co-founders who don't last for the full length of the journey of the company. So you obviously, it is not serendipity that you guys have been together, and being together has created this success. But what did you do right?
I don't know what is right, but I'll tell you what we have done, so that I don't know, maybe it's suited for everybody is not clear. Again, Mani, for us, we've been very lucky as founders, and the reason is three of us are in the same college. You're really first, you kind of met yourselves as friends first, right? So you knew people at that level where you're being very, very vulnerable to each other. That means you just, there's no expectations of each other. We knew each other almost like as close as more than family right now, right? So we know each other so well, right? So that is a very good bonding environment is college for all of us. So that is lucky for me, right? That may not be lucky for everybody, where you look for a co-founder outside of that context of an education environment when you come back. So that's one lucky moment, I will say. But more importantly, I think the big unwritten rule we put for ourselves is obviously three of us. First, we didn't put a boundary of who's going to do what. We kind of kept it where we can actually replace each other pretty much in a very flexible and fluid fashion. Although there was directional aspects that we took, saying, okay, hey Srini, you have to be the revenue person, because he loved the whole outside environment, wanting to be with customers, meeting people. That was his forte. Vidya's is all about operation environments. She needs to put everything together, get that execution engine working, and getting the operating rhythm of the company. That's her forte. Mine is all about product and strategy. I love those aspects, for example. So it sort of complemented the whole idea of what we were trying to do, but yet we can actually flip our roles, get through things, and get things done. So that was a skill sets that we didn't really try to draw boundaries, where we were not trying to say, hey, this is the only way to do it, for example. More importantly, Vani, I think, is the trust that we have for each other is so extremely high. And we are really, three of us are three distinctly different personalities. And again, I go back to my board and say, there's nothing called a founder's vote in our company. There are three people's vote, because three of us can come and actually contradict each other. And we're very comfortable doing that. Both at the board level, at our employee level, everybody knows that we are three distinctly different personalities. I'm an optimist. Vidya is really pessimist. She needs to see something to work. and Srini is like the person who's a number guy. Everything has to be data driven, for example. But again, these are things where interplays in some sense, but the trust levels with three of us are so high that we are very comfortable contradicting each other, kind of debating, discussing, and none of that actually stops the trust that we have and the fabric that we have at the bottom in terms of thing. That core trust that we have built is the most important aspect, because that allows us to have really all the different discussions, because a company building is a very energy enervating exercise. It's a things are there's always an emotional bandwagon of things happening at any point in time. So anybody who wants to put in a towel, it's very because given three, there was always a diversity of views at any point in time. So we could have that conversations, debate, discussions, and the sort of truthfulness that we can get to each other. We can speak our conscience as it comes. We don't need to even filter it, right? We don't even filter our conversation together. That's been the advantage that we have, Vani.
So there is another side to that, right? Where I have seen a strong bonded founder group, building the bigger leadership becomes a problem because they feel like they can't be part of the inner circle. So when the founders work very well together because they have a rhythm and communication that's not doesn't have to be expressive, right?
Correct.
So sometimes then building a broader and in the beginning it's a great asset, but for the
Correct.
company to scale, it becomes also a handicap. How did you think through this?
And it's been a journey of sorts, right? Again, as a company, I think all of us are very conscious of our competence or lack of it at any point in time to shift our gears of what is our roles. That means roles means in terms of what's a kind of how do we kind of evolve the company, because if company comes first, all of us are behind that. So because we cannot so every role, and again we have explored where uh, building the team, it's a conscious decision, Vani. At every scale the company as it goes, we had to really consciously move ourselves out of that picture and saying, hey, are we competent in this particular role, or should we actually bring in somebody else, or are we kind of bring in new teams, and how do we kind of enable them and engage them in a fashion where we are not taking decisions, for example, but allow the teams to take decisions. It has been a conscious choice. So would I say we are successful? Maybe not. We are learning through this process, Vani, as we go through this. But it's a very conscious attempt. We know that we need to be able to bring in teams and get them to work and get the teams to bond, and that's the only way it can actually work through the whole thing. But each one of us have taken ownership of next level of leaders and say, hey, we're going to really nurture them, mentor them, and actually make them the next step. So that the first thing, Vani, that we're taking is we're looking like we want to build clock building companies, right? I don't know if you go back to the good to great analogy from
Yeah.
thing, is there is two sets of founders, timekeepers and clock builders. A timekeeping company, a leader is something that, hey, everybody walks to that person and asks for time. They can look at their watch and actually tell you time. A clock builder leader is somebody who builds a clock, puts it in the wall, and walks away. You don't need the leader. You have the clock there. Anytime you want time, you're actually looking at the clock and not really talking to somebody. So the idea is to kind of build a clock building organization where three of us are not the cogs in the wheels. We should remove ourselves out of the whole system. And yet the company and the institution can actually thrive and grow from a foundational standpoint. So that's a very conscious attempt that we're making. I'm not saying it's successful yet, but that's what I tell people is, if three of us don't exist and the company can go up, that's where the success of this company and its longevity determines that. It's good for our employees, good for our investors, good for customers. The three of us need not exist and the company actually thrives. That's where the status we are going towards, Vani. It's a journey. We're not yet there, but I think that's where we're going after.
And moving away from building of the business to more thinking about big issues, maybe, uh, every industry is today perhaps going to get at some level disrupted with, just Gen AI and other tools that are getting built.
Right.
Especially in the entertainment content space, we'll probably see some radical changes. So, how should how are you thinking, and how should any of us be thinking from uh, thinking about our business strategy, rather, no matter what business you are running, and how are you thinking of your business strategy going forward?
Again, this is like what rightly pointed out. This whole generative AI is a transformational moment for the whole civilization, right? To some extent, all of us
Right.
as humans, this is a big transformational moment. This is internet and maybe 10 times worse off or better off than internet in terms of how it
Yeah.
can play out, right? So we don't know the answer. The reality is, I don't think we have a strategy that I can put and say, okay, the next 3 years is the way we'll do it. But we're taking a much more of a step-by-step evolutionary approach, saying, hey, how do we embrace this change in a much more dramatic fashion rather than waiting for the change to hit you to some extent? This is a conversation that I have with our company where we're saying, hey, how do we kill ourselves, disrupt ourselves to some extent? Because that's a skill the company has to have, independent of whether it's Gen AI today or something else tomorrow. Can institutions outlast themselves by killing themselves and be able to come back from the ashes and rise like a phoenix again, for example? So a lot of times the conversation in our strategy rooms is, what happens if somebody else is going to disrupt us? Let's disrupt ourselves. Let's kill our own business models. Go back and relook at things, and then how we would have done it differently. Because the world has enough people who can actually come in with ideas and actually build it out. So my fear always in this is the paranoia is, maybe there's a 24-year-old sitting in a garage somewhere who's trying to disrupt us, because that's where the disruptions happen. Not in the large companies, not in enterprises that I'm worried about, but really those small ones. So we have to think like a 24-year-old again, come back and actually recreate environments, recreate things, for example. So we have to break ourselves to rebuild again and again, Vani. This is the core tenet that we are actually driving from a company standpoint. Obviously, we're learning new things. We're reimagining the whole way, rather than clinging to the past. A past has no indicator of success for the future. So we're kind of breaking it every day and trying to refigure out, okay, what could have been like this? Why would we not disrupt ourselves? That's the journey we're going through, Vani.
And the specific category of the space that you are, where a lot of things are happening, creator content is just wildfire right now, and platforms are being rebuilt on, this kind of user created content. Different kind of business models are evolving. For people thinking about new ideas in this space, what do you see as the media tech opportunity at large for young startups?
This is fundamentally a transformative time. I'm sure many businesses, but media specifically. If you look at media business, it's a 50-plus-year-old business that existed, and it's going through one of the foundational transformations that happened in this whole business. First is the business models of broadcasters are falling off by the day, right?
Broken, yeah.
So it's kind of completely broken. The economics of the new world is not proven as well. So if you look at the streaming TV world, people actually are making losses, huge losses. It's not proven. And then you have all of the new world of AR and VR and things happening in the immersive experience that's coming through. I think it's a wild west to some extent, because the opportunities, wild west and chaos is the opportunity space for startups. It
Yes.
provides you the most richest ground to come in and actually disrupt things, for example. I truly believe the opportunity exists in terms of bringing in new experiences, which people are not thought about. Creating new storytelling mechanisms where you can tell stories better than, or things like that, right? With generative AI today, and I think we're very close to text to video becoming a reality, for example. So tomorrow, what happens to video production? Maybe I can write a story and the story is created as video directly. We don't need to. So things are happening at a rapid pace where the business is going to be disrupted rapidly, very, very fast in terms of what it can actually do. So I think there is enough opportunity. If you look at the value chain, at every point in time, everything is in chaotic environment today. The act of content creation, the creation economy is changing. It's becoming cheaper, faster, better in terms of what you can create. The tools are becoming cheaper. So the best of the creators can actually create things, for example. The distribution value chain is changing dramatically. Now we're starting to look at, I'm sure with the Apple goggles coming in, Vision, everything is changing in terms of the number of places where you can consume content, the way you consume. So distribution and creation, everything is changing in the middle, Vani. I feel the opportunity exists in every piece of this, because as the business models change is where the opportunity lies for smaller companies to come in. Uncertainty is an extremely good place to start for everybody.
No, I think this is true, and I think there is for so long, media tech was really a very closed opportunity, or a closed network opportunity. So I think for young startups to break through was always harder. I think we are at a place where this industry, there's probably newer opportunities to think through. Any thoughts on the entire creator economy?
And it's in a, I think, Vani, very, very interesting phase. Obviously, started off where, as user-generated content in YouTube, to cat videos that we saw, to how the production systems have changed dramatically over time, right? Now, if you look at it, the creators, obviously, TikTok's been a great, great opportunity for people to build things, for example. Having said that, I think we're just getting started in that economy, Vani, because of the whole text to video, text to imaging models that are evolving. I think a lot more opportunities where I don't need to. I think my imagination can now be converted into a video directly, for example. So storytelling is dramatically changing from a production standpoint. Now, immersiveness, see, gaming and video are all coming together. So eventually, you might be a character in the video itself. And so there's an immersiveness that's starting to come in where you're part of the story to some extent. So clearly, there are clear opportunities where you can actually completely change the storytelling mechanism, the rhythm of how we do that. And coming to live, for example, was always a hard problem in live events or live news, or you want to create a sporting environment. It was a very expensive proposition. The cost of creating live production today is coming down so dramatically that you can actually start creating your own live events, for example, which is a big part of the whole equation that we see, for example. So the tools are already available. I think it's really about the ability of the creators to be able to take that up, build it out, and be discovered in the distribution pipes so that consumers can watch it. I think truly a great opportunity in front money in terms of what can be done.
So, Baskar, current times, and you have seen many, many ups and downs, right? Current times require founders to think through perhaps not getting the valuations they want, or not even getting the funding that they want, or having to have drastic write down in terms of valuations. Oftentimes, how you navigate that is hard, and how you navigate that with a complex set of shareholders, which is inevitable, is very hard. How do you think about your own personal dilution? So all these things become complicated, and oftentimes a company with a potential may get lost because these are, in a bigger scheme of things, temporary setbacks, but you may not feel that or see it that way and not see the big picture. And you have seen through many ups and downs. So how did you navigate this? What do you advise founders today?
Vani, you had an answer in that question itself to some extent. Is to look at it in a long term, Vani. Again, for us as founders, and again, this is something that slightly philosophical, is we didn't start the company, nor are we running it today because it's going to be economically a success or not, because that's actually irrelevant for us. And again, this is what I tell I'm vulnerable when negotiating with my own investors, because I tell them, hey, this is not about money. It's about really, we're trying to build this because the fun of doing this and the kind of the excitement that you get in terms of disrupting a marketplace and creating leadership position, I think that drives us more than all other things, money. So for us, it's not about money. It's not about valuations. None of that actually matters. In fact, as a company, I think when we crossed $1 billion, we didn't have any celebration the second day. Everybody felt like, what's happening? We said, hey, valuations don't matter. If you're building a 20, 30-year-old sort of the road that you're trying to look at, the long road, these are all really, really small pit stops, which don't actually matter in the large scheme of things, money for us. Right? And that's the perspective that we provide to our teams and our own employees, everybody, so that nobody kind of, it's not a valuation is a very short-term approach to doing things. Because in the end of it, the public markets are going to really judge you. You need because valuation today is a set of maybe single-digit shareholders coming together and thinking the value of the company actually has no relevance in a larger scheme of things. You want eventually the best judges, public shareholders, retail investors who really value you because you're able to deliver in a predictable fashion. For us, to get there is really about customer focus. Nothing else matters. We are saying, hey, are we making revenue from customers by delivering a value that they're able to see? And for us, that's the only metric that matters. So we only measure in our company, in our presentations, in our things, we only measure revenue from customers. Are customers expanding? Are customers happy? And are we delivering value? This is the only focus for us. We don't look at valuations. We don't even think about it. We don't talk about it. There's no narrative about it. And as founders, we don't even believe in it. So that's the way we look at it.
And this last question, how do you stay motivated? How do you stay healthy physically, emotionally? Building a company can be stressful or not, depending on how you approach problems. So, what is your personal tips and tricks and philosophy to it?
I've been an entrepreneur since 24, and I'm now 49. So kind of gone through that. So essentially,
it's like just like any other day, right? Nothing new.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. What does it mean if I'm not an entrepreneur? Because I've never even thought about it to the next step, right?
Yeah.
Going back, Vani, I think the first thing is having the least of expectations from everything right, in life. You know what's the worst case? Then it's easier to build on top of it always, right? So for me, philosophically, always, hey, what's your worst case in life? What could happen? If you know this is your worst case, then everything else looks a best case to you to start with. That's important to look at it. Second is being slightly dispassionate about the outcome as much as the journey itself. So this is my favorite pet comment inside the company is journey is the destination. So every day matters. It's not about we are not going for a goal. And I truly believe, like Simon Sinek's, it's an infinite game. There's no end to all of this fundamentally. So taking that philosophical approach has helped me a lot. I'm extremely unhappy person. I think I've been truly gifted in terms of what the luck that we've got, in terms of being able to provide this capabilities for us to be able to operate it and go through this journey. Yes, it's an emotional map. Every day is different. There's a bunch of things happens every day. There's either a happy or a sad moment every time. But if you start taking it to heart, you cannot run it for a long term. So this is a marathon. It doesn't end. It doesn't start. And you're in this, you're going to just be in this, literally in that sense. Taking the slightly a dispassionate approach, I have, for example, like everybody tells you, I think you should talk to our people. I don't get stressed at all. I'm just so, I've kind of built a calmness in by just being dispassionate. So I'm keeping that as a separate entity that I can actually be part of the journey rather than trying to worry about an outcome. That's helped me a lot personally.
So I hope all founders take this Zen with them. I think I resonate with everything you said, but I don't know if it's because of my age. But I do think that this journey can be stressful because of the so many unknowns that founders face. But how you conquer that stress changes you from founder to a leader, because who's going to follow a leader who's perpetually stressed, right? You have to provide that confidence and that capacity to continue to deal with problems. So, but this has been such a great session, Baskar. I took away several learnings for myself, and I really appreciate you making that time. And I, of course, wish you the best at Amagi, but also to your entire team. And very proud of what you have built over the years in creating this unique SaaS company that makes us all proud just from association of knowing what is possible from India.
Thank you very much, Vani. I think a long way to go, but we just started. So thank you for this.
So we'll come back and talk about the journey again.
Absolutely, long time.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining in.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.